We are thrilled to be live here tonight with our agent of change, Honoree Imbolo Mbue. We are so excited. Imbolo is the author of How Beautiful We Were. So not only does it look beautiful, it actually also is a beautiful book. So we'll chat about it in a little bit. Imbolo has won the Penn Faulkner Award for her first book, Behold the Dreamers. But current New York Times bestseller, we are so excited to have Imbolo here tonight and to learn from her and to pick her brain on what makes a successful author tick. So thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you, Ola. Thank you, Caroline. Hi, everybody.
Okay, so I'm going to jump right in with the first question. To give people some background on the book, it is set in a small village in Africa where there is oil drilling nearby. And the effects of this oil drilling has been impacting the community in various ways, but it's getting worse and worse. And the environmental effects are really damaging generations of people living in the village. And they, with no spoilers, they end up taking some action. So we won't say any more about the plot because I don't want to ruin it. But I wanted to ask you two questions, I guess. One, I loved how the names of some of the characters were names of capital cities in the African continent. So we have Juba and Lusaka. And the first question is, when you were naming your characters, was there a specific reason that you chose the names of cities? And in addition to that, how were you able to switch gears? Because we hear from the perspective of different characters, but we're also seeing how they are represented in others' minds. And we were wondering, you know, we were chatting about this in character development and how you map that out, right? Like, do you have your narrative and you build off the thoughts and the characters' inner thoughts and inner monologue, or, you know, do they take on a life of their own and do they drive the story? We're so fascinated to hear your process.
Thank you, Ola. So about the names of the characters, I didn't actually set out planning to do that. I think it started with the name Juba. And I was, I think I had his name spelled J-U-B-E. And I thought, oh, that doesn't sound right. I wanted to, and then I said, let me do J-U-B-A, Juba. And then I realized that Juba was the capital of South Sudan, which is a fairly new country, right? So the capital, Juba, hasn't been around for that long. And then I said, wow, I like when people are named after places. I love the name Brooklyn and Paris and Dakota. I love all of those names. And I hear it in America quite a bit. I don't know many Africans who are named after places or towns or villages. So I said, why don't I do the same, right? Why don't I name characters after Africans? By the way, this novel is set in Africa, but the word Africa does not appear in there. You can infer that it's in Africa. So I also thought that was another way of making it very clear that this is in Africa, because you don't name your child Lusaka or Juba or Cotonou or Bamako unless you have some kind of African connection or you really like Africa. So that is where that came from. I just love names that are related to places. As far as the characters, why I did what I did, so it wasn't something that I planned when I began writing this novel. When I planned it, I started writing it all from just one point of view. The main character of the novel is a girl named Tula. This is a young girl growing up in this village that has been very heavily polluted. And she's obviously very upset about what is happening. And she grows up to lead a movement to make this pollution stop. And when I started writing this, and I started writing it probably before some of you guys were born. You know, I started writing this in 2002, just many years ago. I just had everything in Tula's point of view. But I did many drafts. So I went and spent many years writing a book. You know, you do so many drafts, and I tried many different things. And when I finally got to the first person plural point of voice, it just made sense that this story will be told by the community as a whole. So most of the novel has the generation of children speaking in one voice. But I also knew that I couldn't just do that. I needed to also make it far more personal. Because while this is a struggle between one village and one oil company, it is also the individual battles involved. And so that is why I did that. And it just came from having spent so much time with the characters. And like you said, the characters sort of pulled me there, right? They each had very different stories, different perspectives, like Tula's grandmother's story or her uncle's story or her brother's story. They each had very different stories. And if I didn't tell each of their stories, I don't think I would have done justice, to the struggle, because while such struggles are done collectively, there are individuals in there which will pay very different prices. And that was why it was important that I do that.
Thank you so much for that thorough answer. A question that I have, it's a little more lighthearted, is that obviously at Girls Right Now, we're all writers, but a lot of us, I think, are also big readers. So what was your favorite book when you were a teen, and maybe like the most impactful one that you would recommend to us?
Well, what did I read as a teenager? I didn't grow up in a place that had many books, so I probably read the same things over and over. I think I read a lot of books by African writers also, and some of the names you guys might not be familiar with, but there was a great African writer named Ngugi wa Thiong'o, and he writes about people pushing back and fighting. I really love such books when I was young. I read a lot of Shakespeare because I grew up in a house that had Shakespeare, and I think I was probably like 9 or 10 when I started reading Shakespeare, and I didn't realize that it was way too sophisticated for a 9-year-old. I just read it over and over, and my favorite Shakespeare play was The Merchant of Venice. I love The Merchant of Venice, and I love The Taming of the Shrew. So I think The Taming of the Shrew was probably my favorite thing to read as a teenager, which is a little bit disturbing.
I love The Merchant of Venice too. I think there's so many life lessons in it.
Yes, I love it.
I think it's so funny that, when you point out rereading books, I think I was the Harry Potter generation. So I have really read those books, cover to cover, I can quote the passages. But do you think that also getting this foundation of rereading the same text and classic texts, right? That maybe also honed your craft, because you were like developing your voice, maybe being influenced by these. And also, just a quick favor, if we could ask you before the end to drop in the names of some of the African authors that you grew up with, that I'm sure we would all love to follow up and to learn some more about those. And I think personally speaking, I love seeing, we have Chimamanda Ngozi Adichie coming through. We have all of these amazing, writers from other continents. I'm from Ireland, so I know what it's like to not know books from other continents, and to come to the US and to see these bestsellers lists that I had not heard of a month before, in Dublin. So I think it's really cool that we get to see, writers from other continents coming, but also from learning, because for so long, as you said, Shakespeare was available to you. And that's really, the colonial legacy coming through, right? And did you find when you were writing this book that colonial legacy, it's very clear in the book that you can see the oil company as the new colonists, and that their oppression it's so pervasive, but from the perspective of the children, they're kind of coming of age learning this, and Tula especially, and you can see, her character, and you feel so deeply, within her, and how the men, in particular in this patriarchal society, feel so undermined by this colonizer, if you will.
Right.
So how do you think that kind of, impacted your development? And also, I can't believe you've been writing since 2002. So I was thinking South Sudan became a nation in 2005. So thank God, because Juba might not have been named Juba.
That's a very good point. Yeah, no, that's what I did. I did change the name after South Sudan became a nation. I wasn't that good to realize I was going to become its own country. But yeah, I think it definitely affected. I mean, I read so many books by British writers growing up that I I think that there was definitely an element of, like my very first introduction to literature was Shakespeare. And like I said, I didn't even realize that Shakespeare was Shakespeare because it's just what I had around and I read. But it definitely helped that I read a lot of books by African writers also. And a lot of the books that I read by African writers, they had, like you said, they also had this anti-colonial element to it. Like Ngugi wa Thiong'o or Ayikwe Ama, these are like very, very big African writers. Their books certainly looked at Africa as far as, how much it's been affected by colonialism. And so that certainly shaped my writing of this book because I grew up loving such literature. And the reason I started writing it in 2002 is because 2002 is when I actually decided to start writing. So when I started writing, my first inspiration was to write a story like the ones by African writers who have grown up around. And there were writers from Cameroon who wrote books that nobody outside of Cameroon probably read, but I read them and I was very fascinated. That in addition to Shakespeare, I also was very much influenced and affected by the storytelling in the Bible because I had a religious upbringing and I spent a good chunk of my childhood in church. And so if you read the Bible has a ton of stories, and especially in the Old Testament, and some of these stories are pretty out there. And so when you spend so much time in church and you spend so much time reading the Bible, now I realize that was my first introduction to the art of storytelling, by reading all these stories in the Bible and all these characters, because when you don't have that many books and you have a Bible that has like many different stories in it, and even if you look at both of my books, you can tell that I had a sort of religious upbringing because both of my epigraphs are from the Bible, and the characters, at least in my second book, they wrestle with with the effects of religion as well. So I think that my early introduction was somewhere between going to school and studying Eliot and all of those guys and Dickens, studying them in school, and Shakespeare, and then also reading the African writers in my spare time, and then spending so much time reading the Bible in church. I think all of that created this fascination with literature. Of course, I never thought that I was going to end up writing. I didn't even imagine that. I don't know. I just didn't think that people write books because I didn't see the people who wrote books. I read a book and that was the end of it, right? I didn't think, who is Shakespeare, who is Chinua Achebe? These are not human beings I didn't knew anything about. I just saw their names on books. So I never thought about writing, and that is why it took me a long time to start writing, because it was only after I came to America and I went to college and I started thinking, oh wow, I could actually start writing myself, which is why I think it's wonderful to have an organization like Girls Write right now, because it is great to start early, right? It took me a very long time to develop my craft. I had to do it the hard way, and certainly didn't have mentors like all I've been to Caroline. So it's wonderful that you guys get to be together.
Yeah, so for aspiring writers like the writers at Girls Right Now, I think that a big question that we have is, how will it be like working professionally in the creative field? Is it, obviously I'm sure it's rewarding and super fun to see your work published. Are there any other aspects that you really like about it?
Yeah, I mean, I love meeting new people. I love to talk, in case you haven't noticed. So I definitely loved the chances to talk. I consider myself very privileged that I get invited to places to talk. I've, been to new places, different countries. It's all a great privilege. I don't exactly love flying. I don't love being in a plane as much, but of course, it's hard to get to France without getting on the plane, right? So I have to get on planes. But that is one of the things. I have a wonderful team. I have great editors, and to have people who get your work, like my editor who understands my work and helps me, that makes a big difference. But overall, I'll say it doesn't make the writing any easier. Right? It's not like as if, after I've published 2 books, it's easy. I mean, I'm going to start a 3rd book and it's going to be very hard. I'm going to go through what the rest of you guys are going through. It doesn't really get easier because you wrote 2 books, at least not for me. But I know that I have wonderful people to support me and encourage me, and that, they will keep on pushing me to do my best job. Even if I want to take my foot off the gas, they won't let me. They'll keep on pushing me. So it's wonderful to have that support.
That's amazing. And I love what you're saying about support, because when Caroline asked what your favorite thing is, I was going to ask what's the hardest thing and what advice would you give to our young writers. So you can see who's the glass half full and glass half empty. But yeah, so I was going to ask, you talked about the importance of support and pushing you. And I think, that as mentors and as the Girls Right Now community, we always try and push and support, in a healthy way, the mentees to create and to collaborate and to stretch beyond the comfort zone. I wanted to know, how do you practice patience and not being super tough on yourself? How to kind of balance that, like striving for perfection with being kind to yourself, and not being a constructive critic rather than a harsh critic. If you have any advice for us on that, because I think as creators, that's a constant battle,
Yeah, no, I haven't figured that one out yet, Ola. I'm still very tough on myself. I am. It's not perfection that I am after. I am more interested in excellence, and I know what my version of excellence looks like, and I know when I haven't gotten there. So I know it's not perfect. I mean, I'm not a perfectionist, but I just do not believe in anything less than excellence. So that is what I have. And it's funny because like my editor with my book, How Beautiful Weather, just came out. He kept on saying, this is great. And I said, no, I need you to give it back to me. And it's not yet excellent. And we went through a whole battle. I kept on asking for it back. And just before the book came out, I said, can I have it one more time? He said, no, you can't have it anymore, it's over. But I just, and you need to know where to draw the line. Obviously, like I'm sure I can still look at my book now and find sentences that could be better. But like I have a good sense of my potential. I think that is what it is. I have a sense of what I'm capable of. So if I write something, I know that like this is below my level. So I don't. So that is why I push myself, because I know my level, and it doesn't matter what other people think, because like I said, my team is wonderful. They're very, very. They have a lot of praise for me when I do something, but I know that no matter what anybody says, I know that it's not good enough, because if I don't think it's good enough, then it's not good enough. But like I said, it's not the perfection that matters to me. It's just that I know that I can do better.
Thank you so much for that. Okay, so now I have a book question. Obviously, this book is based on like that's still going on in Africa. There's a lot of drilling and oil, just horrible companies. So what type, I know also that you've been working on this book for 20 years. So what type of research or prep work did you do before and during your writing process?
Yeah, well, the book is not based on stuff that is happening only in Africa. It is based on stuff that is happening all over the world. Environmental degradation is happening all over the world. People are rising to fight back against corporations all over the world. It's happening even in America. There's a lot of events that happen in America that inspire these stories. It might be set in Africa, but it has, I drew inspirations from BP oil spill that happened. There's, I don't know if you guys know about what the DuPont company is doing in Parkersburg, West Virginia, the degradation going on there, or Standing Rock. I mean, there's degradation happening in Ecuador. So this is happening all over the world. And as far as research, that's what I did. But I didn't only look at stories of environmental degradation. I looked at social movements. I looked at people who rise up to fight against systems of injustice. I looked at people throughout history, right? I wasn't just looking at current events. I borrowed and leaned and drew inspirations from a lot of people in the 20th century who took a stand against injustice. And so that is and of course, there's things about the story that are very specific to Africa. But the idea of people rising to take a stand, it is not only in Africa that happens, it happens very much in America. And I remember when I was writing this book, the Black Lives Matter movement was very strong, and the Women's March was very strong, and the young people marching against for better gun laws, that was happening, and I drew inspiration from all of that. So that is the one advantage that I had from writing this book for such a long time. I had a lot of time to look at many things happening around me and get inspiration from them.
Absolutely. And can I just say, this was the first time Caroline and I did a book club. And we were so excited that it was justice driven. It was social justice driven. And I think we've had a lot of conversations throughout this year. It's been a historic year that we've lived through. And a lot of the times we joke with each other that like we get the updates from like each other before we get the news updates on our phones, you know. Always has it. And I think when you're seeing, you know, the Black Lives Matter movement, the violence against people of AAPI origin, it's so tough sometimes. And sometimes our meetings, our weekly meetings, you know, the first 15-20 minutes will just be like having a chat about what's going on. So it was really nice to be able to read such an eloquent book that kind of, you're reliving your own experience as you read it through the voice of Tula, and I think that meant a lot to us as we were reading it.
I'm glad.
Thank you for that so much, Imbolo. And I know we're running out of time, but I wanted to ask you one last question, if that's okay. We wanted to ask, just as a writer, you've already touched on the importance of, you know, starting young and having the support system, but what would you recommend to anyone who's thinking of joining Girls right now, who's thinking of starting to write, you know, why it's important to engage in, you know, programs and work such as Girls right now?
If anybody's thinking, I think you should do it. Like I said, I didn't grow up around writers. I never met a speech writer like you all. I never even imagined that people, I mean, I knew they were journalists because my country had newspapers, but I never met somebody who wrote. And I think that if I had, and if I'd been exposed to it, maybe I instead of studying business in college, I would have studied creative writing or something. But I really think that it makes a difference. I mean, I don't see myself ever not wanting feedback on my work. I think no matter how many books I write, I always love and encourage. And I send my work to my friends. I'm like, go ahead, rip it apart. Tell me everything you don't like. I think there's nothing more wonderful than having people to do that. And it appears that is what Girls Right Now does, and it's doing an excellent job at it. So thank you to everybody who does it, to like you, the mentors and the mentees, and to Girls Right Now. I think it's all such a wonderful idea.
Well, we have a new mantra now, right, Caroline? It's excellence. And knowing what's beyond, what's below your capacity. I love that, Imbolo. I love this idea of having that self-confidence as a creator to recognize that like you are better than that piece of paper, you know, and that is not your excellence. And I think we're gonna do that, if that's okay.
I'm glad.
A little bit of plagiarism. So thank
Please
you
go ahead.
so much. I'll hand over to Caroline, and everybody go buy the book, please.
Thank you again, Imbolo, for joining us here tonight. Congratulations on the new book.
Thank you, everybody. Thank you for having me, and keep on writing.